your cookies and take a seat.
Okay, so welcome back to the second part of the morning session. So please have a seat. So my name is Chiara Macchiavello. I'm from the University of Pavia in Italy and from the Italian National Research Council. And I'm responsible for the education and outreach activities within the next coordination action, the QFLAG. So today now I'm happy to introduce the next presentation that will be given by Professor Konrad Banaszek, who is the scientific coordinator of QuantERA program, and he will tell us about the latest news in the next QuantERA call. So, please, Konrad.
Okay, thank you very much, Chiara, for the introduction. Well, it's a great pleasure for me to say a few words about the QuantERA program, which has already been mentioned several times this morning, and to present our plans for the next year. So I guess most of people in the audience are familiar with what QuantERA is, but let me just offer a very brief introduction. Well, from the formal administrative point of view, QuantERA is yet another collaborative project funded under the Horizon 2020 program of the European Commission. But this is not a project that of the type that have been described earlier this morning before the coffee break. The first difference is that partners in the QuantERA projects are not research institutes or universities or companies interested in quantum technologies. Partners in the QuantERA project are research funding organizations. And we actually have, at present, 32 research funding organizations from 26 countries. So, in some sense, going back to the Greek roots of science in Europe, we could call this consortium a meta-consortium. And this meta-consortium is coordinated by the National Science Center Poland, which I have the honor of representing today, and which is the executive agency funding basic research. So what are the objectives of the Meta Consortium? The consortium of our organizations, its purpose is to fund research, and the research in Europe is funded through joint calls. The idea is to open joint calls again for collaborative projects and to fund them through polling both national and European resources. The actual funding mechanism is quite complicated, so if anybody is interested in how it works formally, what are the rules, I'm happy to explain details maybe in the evening in a Weinstube, but today maybe right now it may be too long a story. So this is the basic activity of the QuantERA consortium, but it is complicated. It is complemented by a range of additional activities like mapping regional, national, and European policies to us, especially to assist partners of the QuantERA program to make further decisions regarding funding in Europe. Also, we try to help projects funded by the QuantERA to become aware of issues such as responsible research and innovation, and also to help them to establish and foster links with industry. A very important aspect of the QuantERA program is to spread excellence across the entire European research area. This is particularly important because taking into account that National Science Center as the coordinator and also a number of QuantERA partners, they come from so-called widening countries, but let me get back to that point in a moment. So the first major activity of the QuantERA program was the co-funded call that was launched and concluded in 2017. The word co-funded is important here because it received top-up funding directly from the European Commission. I must say that I think everybody in the QuantERA consortium was surprised by how popular this call was. We received 221 short proposals, and this was reduced in the first stage of evaluation to 91 proposals. 91 consortia were invited to submit full proposals, and out of that, 26 proposals were funded with the total budget exceeding 32 million euros. The funded projects covered all major areas that were defined in the call announcement. Essentially, all of them, they also cut across this overarching theme of novel ideas and applications in quantum science and technology. You may notice very fast that actually those 5 figures do not up to 26. It doesn't mean that we cannot count to that number. It means that a lot of funded projects, they actually address more than one of these areas. And coming back to covering the entire research area, one achievement we are really proud of is that 70% of the projects, they involve research teams from so-called widening countries. Let me emphasize that this aspect was not taken into account at the evaluation stage. This was one of the criteria that was taken into account at the selection stage when 2 or several proposals were ranked at the same level. So those projects funded in the QuantERA co-funded call 2017 have already started. This picture was taken in Bucharest in late April this year, which is half a year ago, where we had the kickoff event for the QuantERA funded projects. You can find details of those projects on the QuantERA website. As you might have noticed, the effective success rate in the first call was slightly above 10%, and given also the result of the ramp-up phase of the quantum flagship, it's pretty much clear that another call will be much welcomed by the research community in Europe, and this is what the QuantERA Consortium started to work on very, very fast. This is the tentative schedule of the call planned for 2019. According to the rules of this funding instrument, it cannot receive a European top-up. So this call will only pull resources from national agencies. The current plan is to launch this call in November, which is literally next month. And one big difference compared to the call 2017 is that this will be a single-stage application procedure. The idea is that there will be approximately 3 months to prepare the proposals, and after the submission, results of the call should be known in autumn this year, and we hope that the projects will start late 2019 or very early 2020. After consulting the QuantERA Strategic Advisory Board, which takes part in all the on the activities of our consortium, it has been decided that 2019 call will also cover all 5 major areas in quantum science and technology. The idea of QuantERA calls is to be as broad and as open as possible. Now the slide many of you might be really interested in. I should say this is a tentative list of countries participating in call 2019. Wait with the definite list until the call announcement is published next month, because still there may be some changes, and we actually do hope that there will be some additions of few more pins that, as you may notice, are missing from the current map. I should also say that we have Israel also participating in the call 2019, and it's, I think, it's really fortunate today that we also have a number of members of organizations participating in call 2019 among us. So I would like to conclude by asking all the agency representatives who are in the audience to make themselves available and to make themselves visible now, so that perhaps during the lunch break you can ask questions directly to your agencies. Please don't be shy. Monica, thank you. So, thank you very much for your attention, and we are looking forward to receiving applications starting next month.
Okay, so thank you very much, Konrad. So the next part of the morning will be more interactive and will be based on a discussion that is going to be moderated by Professor Mlynek and Professor Calarco. And I was told that in the end there will be a distribution of gifts. So please don't leave. Not to anybody, but...
Not to everybody, just some special people, but afterwards. Okay, so this, okay, fantastic, it is working. So we have no script for the following hour, because it says open floor, and we really mean to have an opportunity for everybody here, from the community, from funding agency, from the commission, to discuss together, to raise issues, to propose ideas, to think together about the future. This is a first moment. Of course, in 1 hour, we don't have the time to discuss all the aspects. Maybe we will have some placeholders of topics which are important and which will be carried on more in detail tomorrow in the community day, as well as in our next conference in Grenoble in February. So that's my introduction here.
Maybe I can add that, of course, for us as science community, but also for our colleagues in Brussels, it's really important to hear from you not only what are your expectations for the future, but what can be improved. How do we deal with those very good, if not excellent, projects that have been submitted but were not funded, you know, approved but not funded? That's a common situation that you also have at the national level. At the end, as Tommaso already pointed out this morning, I think the success will depend on inclusiveness. We really have to take advantage of all the outstanding groups in the private sector, in academia that want to contribute. And for me, and for us, I think it's a real challenge how we deal with the community as such. There is financial support now from the flagship, there is support via QuantERA, there are the national projects, and I think we have to discuss a little bit how this can be really put together to be a joint successful initiative for Europe as a whole. So if you have ideas also on this issue, please speak up. If you didn't like something, if you are unhappy with certain aspects, please speak up too. That's the occasion right now.
Thanks.
Can you stand up
yes.
and say who you are and from which institution?
My name is Enrique Solano from Basque Country, University of the Basque Country. My
University of
the Basque Country in Bilbao.
Okay.
My question is related to some issues that are being discussed heavily and sometimes dramatically in the last months concerning the role of basic science or fundamental science in the flagship. And it is my opinion in particular that there was apparently no strategic selection of projects. For example, it is missing alternatives related to coherent quantum annealer, like making D-wave but correctly, or alternative paradigms of quantum computers, because I don't think that digital ones are the only possibility, and so on. So the final question is the role of basic science through the flagship to disappear and pass everything to companies, or are we going to create an equilibrium where basic science will also have a role constantly?
Maybe we can comment. I can say a few words and then maybe you too, Tommaso. This has been a crucial point from the very beginning. As I pointed out, but also Gustav pointed out in his talk, from the very beginning it was clear this flagship is a flagship on technologies, where from the very beginning consortia should be formed between academia on one hand and the private sector on the other hand, including larger companies, small and medium-sized companies, and startups. This was, you know, how can I say, the rule of the game. And it was not a surprise, I think, to all of us that the number of submitted proposals for this ramp-up phase was largest for basic science. But honestly, I must say, people didn't listen, didn't pay attention. And of course, I think we had 90 proposals. The two of us were not involved at all at any moment in this evaluation process. So we don't know anything about it. I mean, you have to talk to the guys from Brussels.
Fortunately not.
Okay.
I don't want to know anything about it.
But it was not a surprise that this number was really, I mean, what, 80 or 90 out of the 140 proposals was for basic science. Now, in addition to the European money, there is the contribution from the member states. And this is also something that we have to discuss. Of course, the member states probably will say, okay, we give our share, but we will not allow at the end that Brussels determines on the use of the national money. So the national support of the flagship can be also steered towards, let's say, maybe more basic aspects. That depends again on the goals that the member states want to pursue with their national programs. Take Germany as an example. We had this excellence initiative recently. A lot of money was put into the system, basic science, and I think 3 or 4 of the excellence clusters.
Actually 5 out of 6 of the quantum ones
had quantum in it. So basic science in Germany, as far as quantum concerned, is well covered. That might be different in other countries. But again, the goal is wealth creation, jobs, pushing for technology.
So maybe if I can also comment a little bit, because you're raising important questions, to your 2 questions. The first answer is no, and the second one is no. I will reformulate them. The first question was, has there been a strategic selection? And the answer is no. The Commission has not picked, or referees have not picked, oh, now this topic is more important than the other one, or stuff like that. They went via the standard rules of the Commission, which is evaluating those criteria, you know, excellence, impact, and implementation, and giving some marks. And this is how it has been selected. And no one, as far as we have been told, no one has made a choice, oh, now this project is in an interesting subject, we should you know, raise the score. No, it was just done via evaluation, which is what we as a community asked for in the beginning. Sorry?
Do you find it correct that there was not global strategy for the selection? Geopolitics.
So I personally think that bringing in an element of strategy for the future can be helpful, and how to do that is going to be the task of the Strategic Advisory Board to, to advise the Commission, for the Commission to decide, for the Quantum Community Network to give input. Nevertheless, I would also like to say that the way the Commission did the evaluation is what we asked for. Because in the beginning, they tried to tell, oh, we could do the flagship, you know, with similar to the previous ones, framework partnership agreement, and so on and so forth. And the community, very loud, said, we want an open peer review-based evaluation. So what they did is what we asked for. Now, can it be improved? I personally think, yes, there can be a strategic element which will improve, and some of what Jürgen said goes in that direction, and this is one of the things that we should be discussing, okay? Then, in terms of strategy, to your second question, the answer is also no, in my opinion, which is, will basic science disappear? I do not think that basic science will disappear. I also do not think that it will take a major part of the flagship for the reasons that Jürgen said, but it seems to me that there is a broad consensus for the moment in this direction. Of course, I am saying this is just my opinion, because this is the discussion to be carried out, all of us, to be summarized by the SAB, to be decided upon by the Commission in the ramp-up phase. And what we are doing today, and thank you for asking those questions, is exactly opening that discussion.
More questions, comments?
So my name is Nicolas Gisin from the University of Geneva and also from the company IDQ. Quantum technology is not done only in Europe, but also in the US and in China and in Russia and many other places. And we know that unfortunately we are in a terrible, dreadful international situation. And also, unfortunately, probably this dreadful situation actually helps this flagship to establish itself. So my question is mostly, how are we dealing with that? I mean, of course, the scientists don't want anything to hear even anything about that, but the fact is that this is a reality we have to face. And it seems that this has also had implication in the way projects were selected. It will probably also have consequences in the way projects will continue to be managed. What is actually the official political policy of Brussels? Should we collaborate with Koreans, for instance? Should we collaborate with Chinese, Americans? Or should the groups that collaborate heavily with American companies be kicked out? What is actually the official position and what is the reality?
Okay, so the answer is no. There is no official position. And once again, this is connected to the fact that, but of course, Gustav can correct me if I'm wrong, it's connected to the fact that we are starting. It is a very complex and difficult and delicate situation, as you are saying. We as Flagship, as well as the Commission, have been approached by different foreign governments, and I mentioned just two, Japan and the US, but also there are questions about China. And this is something that has been partially discussed, so there has been a discussion starting in the Board of Funders, but there is not yet a clear, definite strategy, partially because it is complex, and partially because the Commission, as they have done throughout this process, really wants to listen to us. So this is a topic that, as I am aware, is in the agenda of the discussion tomorrow in the Science and Engineering Board, and it will be on the agenda of our conference in Grenoble, and this will be one of the aspects on which we are going to carry out consultations with the community, including with the Strategic Research Agenda Working Group. So not the reason why there is not such a strategy yet is not because it is not thought to be important, because on the contrary, everybody acknowledges it is very delicate. And apparently, what I learned myself with surprise, in the Commission, there is no general approach to these topics. So somehow, we have more freedom, we can shape things, but at the same time, there is not an established path. So we have to create our own path. And again, the discussions tomorrow and in the coming months are going to shape that. And again, thank you for raising that, because we will prepare a report with all the issues that are being raised, which will stand for discussion for the future months. I don't know if Gustav would like to clarify something. Maybe I said something inaccurate, or no. It was not too bad.
Maybe Niklas, let me add also a few aspects on your more general question. How is Europe doing with respect to this international competition? You mentioned the US, you mentioned China. I'm not so sure about Russia, whether they are in the same, league. In the US, you have the situation that there are companies like, Google, Microsoft, but also hardware companies like Intel and so forth, that are really putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this field of quantum technologies, mainly quantum computing. And nobody cares if they burn just 100 or 200 million. Nobody cares. They are sitting on piles of cash. Nobody cares. In addition, in the US, you have DOE, you have DARPA and so forth, you have the national labs. And just recently, I think they decided in the US to put another 250 or 300 million for quantum technologies just into the national labs. I met Michael Witherell from Lawrence Berkeley Lab just 2 weeks ago, and they will get, I think, just Lawrence Berkeley, 60 million for quantum technology. So that's the situation in the US. In China, I would say, money is not an issue. Money is really not an issue. Maybe people are an issue, but if you really talk to the people in China, you must be impressed how strategic they act. They send out their young people to the right places to learn about new developments also in the field of quantum technologies, and then they offer them a package that they can just not turn down. They come back with all the know-how, and then they start working. So I would say the situation is somehow different, but as you are saying, the heat is on. and we have to react. With respect to companies, I would say, I don't see a company in Europe, maybe I'm wrong, that is willing to put hundreds of millions of euros into the field of quantum technologies or quantum computing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you tell me right now on the break that I'm wrong. But I don't see it. So what we have to do is we have to do things differently. And I think in Europe we have very good national labs distributed all over Europe. So the national labs, they could play part of the role that, for example, companies like Google or Microsoft play in the US. Maybe there are other options, but I think we have to come up in Europe with our own plan for the future. But competition is tough. And the way how we deal with our partners that we have as scientists in the US or China, that's something that we can somehow try to negotiate and regulate at the EU level and so forth. But I think everybody here has contacts to the US, to China, to many countries, and you probably are not willing to abandon them only because you are part of this European flagship project. No way. Why should we?
My name is Oksana Mishin. I'm from the Technical University of Braunschweig, and I would like to pick up the point about the basic science in the flagship, and I add an observation from the ramp-up phase and maybe a suggestion based on this observation. So it turns out that a basic science has a spectrum, which is what theoretical physicist does about thinks what basic science is, what an experimental physicist thinks the basic science is, what a first prototype developer thinks the basic science is, what the company thinks the basic science is. So in the flagship, I found in the ramp-up phase, I saw that actually all of that basic science contributions were presented in the project, which was fantastic. But as there was a scarcity of the resource, only the last part of the spectrum could have been found. So this is an observation. There is nobody wrong or right in this, I think, but this is something we should learn from the ramp-up phase and understand like where the other parts of the spectrum can also get embarked on the ship. As we said already before, that the ship is big and it has all these contributions and they all rise up their presence. And the flagship, as it was now, was able to find only the last part of the spectrum, which was the prototypes from number 0 to number 5. Okay, from 5 to 9 was already technology part of the flagship, but that part of the basic science was covered, but the rest of the basic science was not. And I think that there have been mentioned good points that there are other financial lines of getting supported, and maybe it is for us to define who should head where, because so far it's not yet clear to all of us. So I'm concerned about that, and I hope there will be maybe further discussions on that. Thank you.
So I would say this, for me, points again to the question of how much strategy should we have. So we got what we asked for, so an evaluation done with the standard criteria of the Commission. But now for the future, you know, since this is a flagship, it is not just a program, it's not a proactive initiative. So how are we going to, you know, channel it towards our goals with all the different components? So how much should a strategic element come in? This is what we, again, we have to start discussing, and so this is something which I would like we take on in terms of, you know, the notes we are taking, in terms of the discussions that we are going to have with much more time tomorrow, and also in the months to come. So this is an open question, and I mean, I'm very happy that these, which I hear are some of the very central questions which have been raised in the last few months, are being raised here, because then we can take them together.
I think what we need maybe at the end of these 2 days is a list of projects that for strategic reasons should anyhow be part of this European initiative. And then we can somehow look at those who are already financed through the ramp-up phase. And then we have to discuss how we can deal with those that we think should be part of the European effort, but are not supported financially or whatever right now, and how we can deal with it. And that's probably something that we also have to negotiate. You have to talk to the member states.
And this is an opportunity to mention something that was written in red in a slide of Gustav, which I'm happy it was written there, because before I was not authorized to mention this, but now I can, because he wrote it, which is that the Commission is considering to create a call for semiconductor quantum computing, and this comes from a reflection that the Commission is making about exactly what Jürgen was saying, connecting to what you are saying, in a different corner of the spectrum. But this is not the point here. You know, semiconductor quantum computing is being regarded by the Commission as an important area, which in the evaluation, because of the way the evaluation worked, has not been supported and might be worthwhile, and this is why they are considering doing this call that Gustav announced. And so I interpret what Jürgen says, which is also my expectation. We should have more of these suggestions, also in terms of broad areas, yeah, that might emerge from the discussions we're having either now, so this morning, or tomorrow.
Hey, Mikko Möttönen from Aalto University of Finland. First of all, I want to congratulate the selection board, all the people here, great launch for the Quantum Flagship. Congratulations on your new projects. You a little bit answered this question. I have two questions. First, I was wondering about what is the latest update on how we will go on. We have now selected some of the projects, and in the later stages, will these be expanded, or will we have new projects in addition to this semiconducting quantum computer? And related to this, the second question is how can new partners join? Not only the research groups, but maybe startups. Like if there's a new startup company, it may be difficult for that to join, to get into the inner circle. So, so what kind of new instruments could we, make up to let new partners, valuable partners, to join these proposals or projects?
Do you have any ideas, any suggestions? What would you like? I mean,
Frank, that's for Mikko.
We are not here for wishful thinking, but I mean,
right.
always imagine you would have 3 wishes free. Right.
So what I was thinking, that it may be too naive to just think that, okay, if there are new startups or new groups, that they will just come into the proposals in the old way that we have formed the groups. But if there would be some additional instrument that would encourage the projects to actually take these new partners, so that it would not be away from them, but it would actually make the consortium much stronger. I think this kind of instrument might be needed.
From my viewpoint, there are 2 aspects. One is being part of it, and I think there is probably great openness by all the consortia to take, for example, startups on board if it fits into the present activities. The other issue is probably financial support. That's definitely more difficult because the money is already, somehow distributed. But we take this with us as one point where we maybe should think about.
Thank you. My name is Alexander Welzel from the University of Applied Sciences.
Where are you?
Here.
Ah, okay.
In the back. I would be interested especially in the question how far and in which detail you follow the pace and investment flows of commercialization of quantum information technology and quantum research in China. I saw that Huawei is one of the industrial partners in one of the selected projects, but also, of course, we understand from a strategically point of view, in the context of this flagship, this is of highly importance. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean when you say you? You asked how closely are you following the Chinese developments? Who is you? The EU. Well, then if you is the EU, then I am going to give them the microphone.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that I'm the EU, so it's the first time I'm... Yeah. No, indeed, we are in the Commission clearly looking what's happening outside the Union. I mean, we are not living in isolation and want to see what's going somewhere else. And these are, I mean, some of the reasons why when we are now thinking, for example, about the next financial perspective in 2021, we're saying we cannot wait or be one day dependent of strategic components or technologies that are produced and designed outside the Union. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we are pushing so much for the flagship. I mean, if you mention China, they have developed their QKD network, they have satellite links, they have some terrestrial links. Now, we don't want to run the risk that in 10 years from now, we are dependent on a key technology for our digital single market, as we have dependency in other market sectors. I mean, just think about high-performance computing, which I know pretty well, where the components, by and large, are coming from outside the Union, but these are strategic assets for our economy and industry. And that's why I want to refer back to what Tommaso said earlier about defining international cooperation strategy. We are now no longer in a pure scientific sphere where it's nice to look at what your colleagues elsewhere are doing and learn from them. We now have very strong commercial industrial interests that we need to preserve. And we invested hundreds of millions collectively across the Union, so it's for us unimaginable that this investment will benefit to other regions, that they will create the market and then sell us the products back. And that's why we are very much behind the concept of the flagship, pushing for innovation, while underlying that for the Commission, basic science is capital, is vital, but this is not the main focus of the flagship. As the colleagues here have said, there are many other programs, national, European, and so on, that are covering certain aspects of fundamental science, and our duty is to link them closely together to make sure that we cover the whole sphere and we have cross-fertilization between the two. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, Rainer Erdmann from Picoquant GmbH Berlin. I want to come back to the previous question, and Jürgen asked, what do you imagine? And maybe an option could be that the coordinator of these projects has the opportunity not only having this internal risk fund to balance risk inside the consortia, but having some money available from the very beginning, having a midterm milestone meeting, and this might be opening the door for new startups, for newcomers in the field, for topics which were identified just at the beginning of a project, where additional partners could really contribute with technology developed by their own. I had once the experience by a project I coordinated in Germany, where we had this opportunity, but it was a lot of bureaucracy. If this could be already part of a form to operate such a project, this might be help.
Thank you. That's a very concrete suggestion, probably for discussion tomorrow in the Science and Engineering Board, and also for further consideration by the Commission. I wouldn't ask now the Commission to comment on this, because I mean, this is not something that they have thought about, and well, in case this would need to be taken up, they would need to identify instruments and so on. I would like just to point out that the Commission, you know, in a step somehow in this direction, asked the projects to establish a cooperation agreement, so that, as Gustav said, it's not just you know, a proactive initiative with different projects, but it is one flagship, and what you are saying might be, for instance, one aspect for consideration as a joint activity. So it's probably a discussion item for the Science and Engineering Board tomorrow, as well as for the whole community. So thank you for suggesting that.
Maybe also one comment from my side. I sometimes heard in the past, maybe this has changed now from the larger companies in Europe, we are technology takers, we are not technology makers. If you have something that we can integrate into our systems, fine, come to us and then let's talk about it. But we are not willing from the very beginning to heavily invest into these new technologies. Therefore, startups, I think, will play for Europe, not only for Europe, but especially for Europe, a very important role in somehow developing the field into creation of additional wealth and jobs. And maybe we have to think more about how we can stimulate startups and once they are there, somehow involve them into this flagship, in this flagship initiative. We take this with us as one point to consider more in the future, because I'm pretty sure the new jobs were mainly created in Europe through startups and not so much through the large companies.
So I just got summoned by our chief organizer saying that there is a growing enormous list of people asking questions, which politely means that I should shut up more. And so I suppose that we just now collect several questions and comments and then we reply.
Okay, Grégoire Bordy, Idée Quantique. I'd like to shift a little bit the discussion to the higher technology readiness level and bringing technologies to applications, because I think as a community we'll be judged as successful if we generate real applications. One of the challenges when you bring a new technology as a startup is the innovation challenge. You know, you're in love with your technology, with the innovation, but the person you're talking to see only risk. You know, they see they have to learn a new thing, they have to take risk, value is not clear. And so what I'm wondering is if there's a scheme or some kind of instrument in the flagship to facilitate this risk-taking from end users in order to make sure that these technologies are actually used in society.
Thank you. Maybe we move on with a few more questions or comments.
Yeah, basically I had a question. My name is Victor Land. I'm from the Center for Quantum Materials and Technology in Eindhoven. And basically I had a similar question. Is there any way the flagship envisions the impact of the technology that we develop on society, and should be also be kind of a part of the money reserved for a program that has human technology interaction, citizen engagement, that kind of stuff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sela from Envision Imaging Technologies. So we are actually a startup from the spin-off from University of Ulm a few years ago. And we were fortunate to win on a proposal in the Quantum Flagship, and we're thankful for that. But at the same time, the way we see this, Quantum Flagship is trying to position Europe in a very competitive way. And competitive is, of course, outside of Europe against the US. And as a small startup, and I don't mean this to sound like we're venting again around how the US is different. But definitely, when we're seeing our competition in the US, where they have the public ecosystem of SBIRs that are sponsoring them, and then the private ecosystem of VCs that are investing in them, and the strong universities that are able to translate this technology, we definitely feel we need some more support here in Europe, especially for the quantum technology companies, because the current vehicles for startups, such as the SME instrument, they're looking for technology readiness level, which is definitely not fitting those of quantum technologies. So my question is, and I think it was already been asked, and building on the fact that startups will deliver the growth that you're looking for, in my perspective, and you need those young, hungry, scrappy and hungry companies, because in my perspective, tenured professors will not be able to eventually translate this into new companies, right? It's going to be those young companies that are striving to succeed. What kind of vehicles can be brought in Europe, perhaps a sub-program of the SME instrument, which is more fitting to quantum technologies? This is a question for the EU, to support those startups in a way that we actually translate this technology into commercial applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we take another one. Or let me ask, who still wants to ask a question or make a comment? Okay, so let's take one more right now, and then we have an answering round, and then they move on.
Hello, my name is Stefan Gross, and I'm a consultant for AI sensors and quantum in Berlin. And I also wanted to talk about China. So in recent years, I've worked a lot in China in robotics, sensors, AIs, and I've been very impressed like how the Chinese work. And I'm a little bit worried, or I want to ask what we can do, because the Chinese, in robotics, for example, some things they just do. They're not like bound by some traditions, Western culture. They have a huge market, that's also an advantage, but for example here, people will say, oh, Einstein is so great, you cannot touch his theories. But the Chinese will do it, they will just try anything. And what I'm asking, we maybe have to look to try to also be more rational and be free from our like culture and traditions if we want to prevent them from getting the next satellite and the next technology. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we start with giving some answers. There were questions concerning startups, risk-taking, financing,
instruments.
Gustav.
I mean, these are all very valid questions. I'm quite happy that they are raised. Now, there are two things I really would like to insist. I mean, we started the flagship with the instruments, with everything we had at our disposal. But this does not mean that this is the perfect model or should be an eternal model. Now, questions on access or inclusion of the startups, additional funding inside, what is the best model? These are precisely the questions I would like to see now much more because we still have the opportunity to address them in the after ramp-up phase. I really would like now to have the whole community helping us identifying what should be the concrete priorities for the next phase and what are the best ways of implementing them. I mean, for the moment we have a variety of programs. We have SME support programs, but they're not dedicated to quantum. They're in general. Question is, should we have something dedicated, something special for SMEs in quantum? Should this happen through the flagship? In what way? I mean, these are all open questions where we would really love to have the input and the answers. This also goes to adding participants to running actions. Our resources are finite. We have committed the budget. We're now looking at what is left for the last calls. But other than that, we cannot add more calls. So we can only work on collective activities with the flagship projects and all the other projects around to see what are the common needs or common activities that you could start or launch either across the projects or going further and looking for participants, partnerships outside the flagship.
Thank you.
Okay, this last question was more a comment, I think, about China. I mean, you all have contacts to China. They have a clear strategy, not only in quantum, but also in artificial intelligence, robotics, battery research, e-mobility, and so forth. And they don't talk about it. Once they decide, they just do it. It happens tomorrow. They are also cooking with water, that's right. But I would say there is an urgent need for action in Europe.
Ferdinand Schmidt-Kahler from the University of Mainz. Today we celebrate all these projects which get funded and we are very excited, it's fantastic, but there have been about 100 ideas which are not funded. And these ideas, there may be really some problems with them and so on, but I think now it could be the time for the captains of the flagship to take the abstracts of these proposals and then in a proactive way address the coordinators or steer, combine different consortia, say here is a company really missing, but I have an idea, what company could jump here into this proposal. The coordinator just didn't know about this, and so you have the kind of a much wider view around, and I think it could be a good chance now to grab into these abstracts and have a view.
Thank you, Ferdinand. We take another 3 questions or comments.
Hi, Andrew Lord from British Telecom, looking after BT's quantum research interests, and I'm really encouraged by what's been presented so far. But I want to ask about classical normalization. So a lot of the use cases you showed this morning have got solutions that are already available in the classical world, probably not as good, maybe not as high a spec, but nevertheless will work. I mean, a good example is classical cryptography, which is an absolutely massive industry already. So how do you keep the research that you're doing and the projects here honest by comparing them or baselining them with what already exists in a classical world, which is, to be honest, moving forwards very quickly? One way might be to have those kind of classical guys on the advisory boards, etc.
Thank you. 2 more.
My name is Igor Zakharov. I am from Russian Federation. Establishment, it's a university called Skoltech. And I would like 2 parts. Small piece of information, a suggestion. Small piece of information is just to fill up on your doubt about the Russian organization. Now, we are a mostly international team of scientists working on quantum technologies, field of as well Russian excellence as well, and from all parts of the world. Here you have Professor Jacob Biamonte, who is world-known scientist for this kind of thing. He works at Skoltech. And so our funding is Russian funding. It's a mixture of private and government money. And we have liberty to do any subject we want and choose any direction we want in science. We are completely free to do whatever makes sense and where we can really excel in the science. And this is what I wanted to suggest also for your maybe tomorrow's discussion within the Commission. We are willing to contribute to IP of Europe through the way we work and through the way we contribute to the excellence of science. So this is unlike the Chinese who take everything and build up their own garden. We are part of the world community. We are raised like this through our heritage. And we are willing to collaborate and cooperate with European scientists, as we have always done in their previous engagements going forward, with our Russian affiliation as well. So that's kind of suggestion and offer. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 more.
Bernard Schenk, AID. What I was missing a little bit from your government structure is, have you planned some interface to some other European technology platforms? There are some that could be relevant on enabling technologies like photonics or smart systems, or more application-oriented like high-performance computing, because it might give you, it's more a comment than a question, it might give you some added value. And if you are able to influence also the strategic research channels of these platforms, I think it would make sense, and you can leverage also some people here. I know at least 4 persons in this room who are already involved in some board of stakeholders of another technology platform, so I think you should consider this.
Thank you. Maybe we can try some answers. Some of what you said were more comments. Maybe I start with Ferdinand Schmidt-Kahler's question. The 2 of us, we do not know which proposals were submitted. We do not know why the decisions were taken as they were taken. So this is something I think that we have to discuss with Brussels once the flagship started, which is the case now, today, and that's wonderful. How we deal with those proposals that have not made it. So we have to look at it, if this is possible, and then we have to somehow think over how we deal with it, how we pass on this valuable information to the scientific community. I think that's something that maybe this strategic advisory board can do, at least partly, and what the Quantum Community Network can do. That's at least the way I see it. I think it would be a shame if we would not make use of the proposals that were on the table for, future activities.
Yes, and then there were a couple of questions about connection and liaison, both, and this was a question from British Telecom, with sort of our classical counterparts. And here I think that one aspect is possible involvement of figures from people from those communities either into the strategic advisory board, so there is an open call for candidates for that, and or in other specific discussion groups. For instance, one example of this is the photonics community was mentioned, and indeed in the photonics platform, Photonics 21, not only actually the next coordinator, Marcus Wilkens, which will, coordinate and the coordination action Q flag, providing the secretariat, he has done the same for the Photonics 21 platform. So there is this very clear connection there, but several of our colleagues who are present here today have been elected into the Photonics 21 platform and are bringing those discussions further. And so these are channels which are already open, at least partially, and certainly this is one of the tasks of the coordination action to strengthen this, and this is one of the reasons why the Commission is funding that. Now, on the specific aspect of Russia, which is, of course, a very delicate subject in terms of, on one end, of course, we are aware of this great tradition and cooperation. At the same time, we are aware that there is a very delicate situation concerning foreign policy, which concerns Russia. And certainly, so my position has always been, when I discussed with your government, I spoke to a couple of deputy ministers, advisor of Mr. Putin and so on, I told them, look, I mean, do you want to be involved? Do you want to have some relationship? The only way in which this can happen, if at all, or in which it can be explored, is via some official contact to the Commission, such as the United States and Japan and so on have done. And so if and when some contact in this direction may come, then it will be an opportunity for the Commission to respond in terms of a general strategy that will be developed according to what Nicolas Gisin said. At the moment, we are missing the framework for this, and so we really need for really the high level in the government to sort of express some propositions to our European Commission.
More questions, comments?
I've seen one more. Who else has a question for the last 10 minutes? So we do also a bit rapid. Yes. So, Max. Max, you go first.
Max Riedel from Siemens AG. Until last month, part of Tommaso's team, so many of you have received emails from me. So I want to tell you a very short story and then get to a point from this. In Munich, we have a chair of teaching at LMU, Ms. Linhoff-Popin, who is teaching Internet of Things. And she did in her last lecture, visited by 300 students, people could choose between a classical machine learning task and a kneeling task. So in a Übung, in a lecture exercise. And 97% took the annealing. So those are all computer scientists who have no relation to annealing. They know nothing about quantum physics. And 97% of those took that lecture. And afterwards, she said, my office was run over by students who wanted to do an annealing project with me. And the same chair has been very active with the local big companies in Munich and very successful doing with them project on annealing. My message of this is the computing science community, and we should, I think if we want to be successful, we need to connect much more our physics community. I'm a physicist, you're a physicist, you're a physicist, right, to these people, because where the money and where the music is digitalization and IT, and we need to be, much more connected to these people, I think.
Thank you. Wolfgang Ernst.
Wolfgang Ernst, Graz University of Technology. I'm asking a very down-to-earth question, which has to do with the contributions from the different countries. In the first QuantERA call, it depended very much on what the individual countries would contribute or the agencies. So I had a consortium which was partly built by friends who were even willing to contribute without getting much. For example, Denmark was not willing to give much, but we are always bound to get quantum materials or topological materials from there. Is this going to continue in this way? Is the next QuantERA call also built on this problem that some countries do contribute and others do hardly at all?
Thank you. Two more.
One more.
There's someone.
Hi, my name is Isabel Sørensen. I'm from Acknowledgment in Zurich and representing Maximal project in the methodology and censoring pillar. As the dissemination manager, I have a question to you, but also to the entire community. So given that the overall goal is European leadership in quantum technologies, do we want this to be a bottom-up approach, or do we want this to be top-down? I would like to ask also the Commission, because this is a very political matter, if we as projects should expect kind of leadership from you, or if you would like us in the different pillars to take leadership on this. So placing a strategic resource from scientific projects where they impact the most in our opinion, or they impact most in the entire flagship. Thank you.
Thank you. Last one for this round.
Okay, one more time, Oksana Mishina from the Braunschweig University. And I would like to raise up the topic of outreach and education, which was already picked up by the European Commission, and it could address needs of companies that need more trained engineers, and also involving other communities like in quantum, like science, computer science, as well as maybe facilitating the users, the end users, who would also need more information and more quantum awareness in a way. So the question is actually to the European Commission, and it is if within the last resources for the last calls, which are going to be adjusting the strategy, there would be also a space for education and outreach, which have been already found to be needed.
So we had, well, one comment, a very nice story from Max Riedel, which I guess didn't require an answer. We had a question for QuantERA, which I guess is for Konrad Banaszek, wherever he is sitting. So there we go.
Okay, so this was meant to be part of that Weinstube tale in the evening, but after this question, I guess I should say a few words more. Well, QuantERA Consortium is very heterogeneous. This is because it consists of national or regional funding organizations, and their mandates are very much different. Also, their missions, their modes of operation are different, and their priorities are different. Therefore, I think the only way for QuantERA to work is to define the call scope very broadly, but then to put in specific annexes expectations or requirements from individual agencies. And that way, we hope that consortia of researchers are able to align themselves to those specific requirements. I think this scheme does work. I mean, given the number of proposals and the number of projects we managed to fund. But in general, I mean, this also has to be taken into account. We cannot really introduce uniform rules across all the funding organizations participating in the call, because simply this cannot work. I mean, we operate generally on the subsidiarity principle. We try to assist funding agencies to fund research they would like to fund.
Thank you. Maybe Gustav, you want to comment on the outreach question?
Yes, indeed. First of all, of course, if you have a superb result to be publicized, to make known, I mean, by all means, you should do so and proudly communicate what you have been doing. However, don't forget that you are also part of the flagship. So it's essential that this communication also clearly links towards the flagship as a concept, shows your pertinence there. and how you contribute to the improvement of every citizen's life. Now, we have the advantage of having a coordination support action that will help all the projects to coordinate the communication efforts and facilitate the outreach. I mean, we have professionals that know what message should be published when, and what is the best channel, and what is the language to be used. I mean, we're all brilliant scientists, engineers, we can understand very well technical matters, but if it comes to every citizen, how do you communicate what quantum technology will do to change your life, that you say, okay, I'm paying my taxes, but I see something really nice coming out that will change my everyday life. So that's why also for the event of today, we'd ask all the projects to withhold their communication before we have launched the event to have a massive impact, rather than having individual dispersed messages that don't have the impact that we really can have.
Thank you.
With respect to this bottom-up, top-down question, I think you need a good balance of both. Of course, in your proposal, at least for the big pillars, you probably had to define some milestones and goals and so forth, and you should go for them. On the other hand, if someone comes up with a new idea in the framework of such a project, you would be stupid if you wouldn't pick it up and make the best out of it. So I think it's really a balance between new ideas, but also pursuing the goals with respect to developing technologies. Okay.
Okay, so we are at the end of a first, I'd like to underscore a first discussion, because tomorrow there is going to be much more. And so now we come to a first moment of acknowledgement. So I would like to ask my work package leader for strategy to bring to the stage some stuff which, and I need a few people. So I need Denise Meyer, who is not here. I need Frank Wilhelm, who is not here. Fantastic. I need Lydia Sammarti and Alina Hirschman, who are also not here. Oh, how beautiful is that? Oh, okay, Frank is here, but is Denise here? Okay, so never mind. We start, so that would have been the last one, but I should say, Frank, please you come on stage. So, oh yes, okay, no, okay, take this, hide it, give me this. Okay, so Denise Meyer has been really the person, so Frank told us a story that he once was contracted in some, I don't know, some party, some big, you know, whatever fair, to do something that he hates, organize a party. So Frank is a very introvert person, and he hates organizing such a thing as he did today. And then, so he thought, I can only survive this if I found a professional. And so we amended the contract of the coordination action. We are still fighting with our PO to do that. No, she's very supportive, of course. We are fighting with the European Commission's system to do that, which is never working. Anyway, to enable her organization to be with us, and we have two important presents for her. The first one is a Viennese thing, of course, which is of spherical form. And another one is, of course, something which is obviously something connected thematically to us, which is a quantum of solace from James Bond. Okay, thank you very much. But at least Denise was paid to do this. Instead, Lydia and Alina were not paid. I still cannot believe, because they dealt with our communication strategy, yes, and I get phone calls from journalists saying, I mean, who are these people doing your press kit? I have never seen such a beautiful press kit, such useful press kit from scientists. Normally it is completely ununderstandable. And they made it for us, okay? They are tweeting for us as we speak. They organize it fantastically. They are not even, I would like to underscore that, not even yet members of the coordination action, okay? They will be for the Q flag. And so for them, there is a very new release of the band Tangerine Dream, which is called Quantum Gate, for you. But then, of course, You know, Frank was suffering a lot throughout this. We had several late-night phone calls, and so we looked very carefully for the most appropriate gift on the internet. And let me show it to you. I will read it first in German, yeah? And then I will translate it. This book says, EU-Gefühl, Quantenheilung für ein erfülltes Leben. It means EU feeling, quantum healing for a fulfilled life. Frank, this is yours. And now you enjoy your chicken curry.
Well, before you go, let's also give Tommaso a hand, because he was the person among many here in the auditorium who really pushed for this quantum flagship. Thank you very much, Tommaso.
Thank you. And now for curry, please. And be here 5 minutes to 2 because there is music to start the big party.